Greetings, adventurer, and welcome to D&D Academy, where we will be giving the lecture today on the 3 main ways of writing for Dungeons & Dragons. For this lecture, it will be taught by me. You can call me Alatar the Time Wizard, and we will be traveling through time back and forth wibbly-wobbly to show you all kinds of lessons and teachings in the beautiful art of DMing. Please silence your sending stones and let's get into it. We don't have all the time in the world, get it? Because I'm a time wizard that does time stuff. But we are going to go over this lecture, of course, and go over the 3 main implementations of writing. Now, keep in mind, this is not the only 3 ways that you could write, but it is the most common that I have seen in my personal experience, and it is what we will go over today. To think about how these work is quite easy, seeing as we are already in a lecture, is to imagine you are going into a test. And for this first method, pretend that you have spent the last couple weeks preparing all that you can for this test. You've studied every note, you've gone every other lecture, you've put every single calculation and memorized every fact that you could. In result, when you step into this examination, you feel prepared. Anything that it will throw at you, you have an answer for. You have practice in. You have already thought it out and are ready to give your answer. Now, the second method is that if you've spent the last week somewhat studying for the test, you feel slightly prepared, more prepared than if you didn't do anything, but there will definitely be some surprises to come your way and you'll have to do some quick thinking on your feet. And, of course, that brings us to our final main thing, which is if you entirely forgot that you had a test that day, and you're going to wing it and do it to the best of your ability. Now, I don't plan to haunt your ears with this wrinkly old voice, so if you could give me but a moment, I'm going to step into the back and locate a potion that will allow me to speak as if my body was 19 again. In that time, go ahead and follow my TA to receive your textbooks.
Just a moment while I get you your books. Make sure you don't step on anything. I know it's here somewhere around here. I found it!
Now that I have this potion and I can sound a lot better and you have your book, we can go ahead and go over it and discuss the first method, which is of course the work now, not later. So, a lot like studying for a test, you're preparing on every possible route and path that you can. You have every item, every NPC, every monster, every path that you can think of planned out and ready to go. What this does is it makes it that you do more work outside of the session, so you have to do less improving in the session. You have a better sense of what's going on, you have more proficiency in it, and when done right, you can see that a DM really knows what they're talking about when they do this. So jumping into the pros of this method, the first major one is that you are going to have an incredible sense of world building. It is going to be immaculate. You spend a lot of time writing your world, you're going to be very passionate about it, you're going to be excited to share it, and you're going to have a lot of content for your players to dive into. Now, if foreshadowing is your forte and something you really like and enjoy seeing it done, then this method really makes it shine. Once you know what's behind the door, it's very easy for you to drop breadcrumbs and to drop trails for your party to look into. Now, another benefit that comes out of this is that things will be more balanced out. You can now add items, spells, or homebrew abilities that will be more given their fair share of time to think about them and think about how they could be countered or ways they could be used, so you don't accidentally create something that's overpowered. Don't get this one confused with incredible world building. What I mean by strong sense of lore is that you have proficiency in the history and knowledge of your world, and it's more of that, it's the skill of depicting it and showcasing it to your players. This can very well be sort of something that the players pick up on immediately, whether a DM essentially knows what they're talking about. And the final pro of this is probably the most rewarding for you, and that's that you will essentially craft a remarkable story that, if done correctly, your players are going to remember it even 20 years down the line when they've moved on to other campaigns and other groups. It's going to be something that they'll remember forever. Now we start jumping into the obstacles that you guys will have to overcome, and the first one is quite obviously with this method, it is requiring the biggest amount of time, and if you have work, school, or any kind of hobby, that just might not be possible for you. Now, the next one is the most tragic, and it's something every DM has to deal with at some point, and that's doing some writing that's not going to be played out into the game. Now, while it does suck, it is perfectly fine. You should always listen to what your players are doing and where they're trying to take the story, and play into that. If it means you have to cut content, so be it. It is the burden that you will sort of essentially have as a DM. However, it does not mean that it's the end of the world. The best thing you could do is grab that content that was cut out and either bring it into another zone or just save it for another campaign entirely. It doesn't mean that your writing has been wasted. Now, this next one does go hand in hand with what we were just talking about. That's that you might develop some high expectations based on what you have already made. You want that to be what's played out because it's prepared, it's what you're confident in, and as such, it causes you to be less flexible in the story. This is something that can create tension between you and your players if you don't learn how to let it go. And unfortunately, it is one of the cons of doing this method, is that there will be some writing and there will be some expectations that will have to be let go. Now, this second method is what I personally feel like is the most used in D&D. It's what I have both experienced the most as a player and as a DM myself, and that is the some now, some later method. This is essentially where you do a great amount of writing outside the session, but you've also left vacancies to be able to improvise within the session itself. Now, the first pro of this is that you're still spending a great amount of time outside of the session writing, and so you're still going to have that great foundation that you can come back to and help guide you as you sort of run the game for your players. As such, I really like this because it allows you to have a larger picture in mind while also being adaptable to their choices, which allows you to weave the story around your players, which is what every DM should strive to do. This is also what I said, where you create these vacant spots of improvise, is what allows you to also be creative during the game. You don't have this pre-established lore you have to go off of, but rather your instinct and your judgment on what you feel would be best carried out. Overall, this is my favorite method and what I personally believe is the golden standard of how DMing should be, and that is just because it creates such an amazing synergy between DM writing and character choices. You have this world that the DM can create that the players can be absolutely immersed in, but the story is also going to be weaved around the characters' choices, thus making it feel very impactful for them. Now, going down the list of obstacles, however, the first one is that you're going to have to start improvising. If you're struggling with this, practice does make perfect, but I always kind of go down sort of this golden rule of when in doubt, just go with the flow of the players. Now, the second obstacle is, of course, that anytime you introduce improv, you run the risk of breaking consistency. I usually solve this by having it that someone lied in the story if I did this unintentionally. It's a great way to kind of think on your feet to push some tension, but also make it seem like you didn't make a mistake. Last but not least, it's entirely possible that your players are going to ask you for something that you didn't prepare for, whether it's an item or a piece of information, and now you're going to have to think of this right off the sort of the quirkiness of your mind. It is something that could be very easy sometimes or very difficult sometimes. Don't feel bad if it's not the most amazing starstruck item or piece of information. You could always take the time after the session to sort of recount what it is and inform them, or change the item to make it stronger or weaker. Now, the third method is kind of like walking into your class and forgetting that you had a test entirely, but you do plan to walk in there and activate every single brain cell to clutch this bad boy and possibly just maybe look over your shoulder and see what someone else did. Let's be honest, we're all guilty of it, but you have no idea where the story is going to go, no larger picture in mind, no development planned out. However, this does not mean it's entirely a bad thing. In fact, in the small zone where this operates in, it's the best or worst sessions that could possibly be made. Now, this is usually a method that is operated in the situation that all of you are usually busy and have this understanding. The DM doesn't have time to write out this insanely crafted world, and the players know this, but they're ready to just get into some D&D and have fun with it, roll with the punches and see what goes on. Now, the first benefit of this method is the fact that you are extremely adaptable to your players and the story. You're ready to take it and, in fact, kind of banking on what your players decide to do for how the situation plays out. This plays in large part to the second benefit, which is that you have no expectations of how the game's going to go because there's no writing to really go off of. So you're completely open to any wacky or fun idea that the players want to have. The benefit that you can capitalize on the most, however, is that you have complete freedom to take the session where you want to go. There was one instance, for example, that my players were arguing with an NPC of whether or not the moon exists. They wanted to spend the rest of the session building a rocket with the artificer to fly up there and see for themselves once and for all. I still have yet to find a session where we laughed as much or as hard as in that time, and it's just a very special moment that can very much be created in this context. Now, for those of you that like the rule of cool, it's encouraged and best utilized in this method, because anything that you find cool in the session, you just go for it. When you put all of this together and you do it correctly, you will have some of the most fun sessions that could ever be done in D&D. It's going to be filled with humor, laughter, and all kinds of crazy stories that they can share. However, this method is entirely difficult to pull off, and these are the obstacles you're going to have to deal with. For the first one, it's rather quite simple and quite obvious, and that's that you better be good at improvising, and that's because that is essentially what you are doing for the whole campaign. Now, the other one is that you're not going to have any planned writing, and this is more that you don't have a guide to help you carry your improv in a certain direction or kind of know what's going to happen behind the corners. It does create a break from world building, and so if you're okay with that, that is going to effectively be what happens. With no planned writing, this means that you also need to get really good and really talented at naming NPCs on the fly, creating backstories in the moment, and make it enriching and sort of intriguing for the players to dive into. It's for this essential reason that all skills of DMing become absolutely fundamental, and you need to be able to play them at its highest level, or else it's all going to crumble apart. This is why typically I would only advise this to be done by DMs who have a lot of experience, and I'm talking years, that they can sort of pull off the framework of what they have done and understand what makes intriguing quests or intriguing writing for the players to dive into. The other exception that you can do it is if the players have the expectation that this campaign is more of a fun sort of adventure rather than a story-intrigued one. In that case, you could absolutely go bonkers with it, because that's what the players are kind of in for. They know to not really expect anything serious or lore-heavy. You guys are just there to have a good time. Now, if the players are expecting something entirely different than that, and you are running this campaign in this method, then I give as much caution as I can. If you don't pull this off to its highest capability, it could easily end your campaign right in its tracks. There really isn't one correct method to run with, nor a wrong one to do. Each is going to be favored by people differently, and most of it is just going to be a reflection of your natural skill, talents, and overall thought process as a dungeon master. I have noticed that people who are more into the idea of writing and find that hobby more fun tend to go with the first option, while people who have a larger investment in the acting side of DMing usually go with the third. The second one is my personal favorite, where you can grab the best blend of creative writing and creative acting and create this unique experience where you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. Of course, there might be those who run it differently. These three are the most common from my experience. I would heavily advise to get as much experience as you can before attempting the third one, unless it's your guys' first time running the game. Go wild and have fun with it. Overall, whatever style that you develop for yourself or method that you use, the most important and fundamental thing is that you listen to your players. That is always what makes a great DM. The game is made for them, and as long as you're listening to them and they're having fun, you're doing your job as a DM correctly. With that, I've taken up enough of your time, so go ahead and have a wonderful day and make sure that you just have an overall blast with this game. It's a wonderful career and hobby to get into. Happy DMing.